Okay, let's move on to the back pockets. So the first thing you're going to do is finish this edge here and fold it down 1/2 inch. Now, this denim is not behaving for me, so I have decided I'm going to put some cotton tape into this seam to stop it stretching out because it is really stretching out for me. So I'm just going to pop that in there, and then I'm going to pin stitch and pin stitch and top stitch it. And then I'm going to fold the other sides in. Kind of similar to what we did with the coin pocket. So you can see here, I've pin stitch and top stitched it. And then I pressed the other sides in by 1/2 inch all the way around. You can see that I fold it in half and just put a crease in there just so that I can make sure that that apex ended up at the bottom. So I'm going to do them with both pockets. And then I'm going to take my back pieces . Okay, now at this point, you can not put the back pockets on, or you can put the back pockets on, and it's up to you. If you think that you're going to need to alter this, or if you haven't made it before, I would suggest actually putting the pockets on last, which is actually a bit of a pain. To be honest, it's actually much easier to put them on at this point in time. However, you can get the placement just right. So the pockets are going to go where the drill holes go just inside the pockets, pocket edges. While you're at it, you can put a label underneath. So here are some exciting Muna and Broad ones that just arrived. So you can have that just peeking out the side like that. So we will pin stitch and top stitch that down, and then put a little horizontal bar tack at each end just to hold the pockets on. So that's the next step. Okay, so I've got the pockets on. Now we're going to sew the yoke seam. So you'll notice that the upper edge of the back is straight and the yoke is curved, and that's to put some shaping into the top of the bottom. If you're doing fit 1, this will be more pronounced. If you're doing fit 2, it will be straighter, not quite as curved. So we need to match this curved edge to a straight line, and we're going to sew it with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So when you're lining it up to sew, what you need to make sure to do is line up the stitching lines, which means it's the stitching line here, so it's a 1/2 inch seam allowance that will match, and you'll have a little tail hanging off the edge, and it'll be the same at the other end. And that's so that when you press the seams down, which is what you'll do at the end, they will all line up nicely. It's a bad pin holder. Okay, so you'll sew these together with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then you will finish them together and top stitch and pin stitch it downwards. So if you have not made these up before, so if this is the first time you're making them, which I'm guessing it is because you're watching the sew along, what you'll actually do from this point forth, as it says in the instructions, is you will just baste stitch the rest of the garment construction up until the waistband. Then you'll sew on some cotton tape and try them on, and then do your fitting adjustments, and then mark them onto your piece, go back, re-sew things normally, and then do your top stitching and pin stitching. So from this point forward, I'm going to just talk it through as though you've made it a million times, and so you know where to top stitch. So maybe this is like after you've fitted it to yourself. Right, so I have sewn and pin and top stitched that down. Now we need to sew the back crotch seam. So I'm going to put right sides together. We need to make sure that we match these yoke seams really accurately, because when it's flipped open, like, you'll see that match. So you really want to take your time and match it well. If you need to go back and unpick it, that's fine. Okay, just checking it. Okay, so I'm going to sew this back crotch seam down here with a 3/4 inch or 2 centimeter seam allowance all the way along, and then I'm going to finish the seams together. Now if we look at our front piece, the seams are top stitched to the wearer's left. Okay, so that means that for the back we also need to top stitch them to the wearer's left. So once we stitch this seam, we'll finish them together, press them to the wearer's left, and pin and top stitch it down. Okay, so we've sewn that crotch seam and top stitched it and gotten a nice join there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to sew the side seams. So jeans are always constructed a little bit differently from regular pants. So we're going to go right sides together and we're going to sew the side seams of the jeans with a 3/4 inch seam allowance or 2 centimeters, and then finish the edges together, press them towards the back. And then what we're going to do is we're going to pin stitch down, not all the way, just down to just beyond the fullest part of the hip. That's to reinforce them and stop them from pulling apart. We don't need to do it beyond this hip point, and this is kind of a classic jean style. It's just to reinforce this hip section where there's more strain with your, you know, bum, basically. And then, so it's about 15 inches down. We're gonna pin stitch that towards the back, and then we'll press it and then pin stitch it, and then just back tack at the end of that row of pin stitching. Okie dokie, so the jeans are looking kind of like a skirt right now because they're not sewn up in the inseams. So now what we're going to do is sew the inseam in one big pass. So we're going to match it at the crotch, trying our best to match both the stitching lines and the seam lines. I would say the stitching should take precedent over the seam line because they'll be more visible, but only if you, I don't know, are looking at the crotch. Okay, so the inseam, so you'll do like one leg and then the other leg with a 1/2 inch or 1.3 centimeter seam allowance. Then you will serge it or finish it together, press it to the back, and then what you'll do is you will pin stitch it all the way around towards the back. You will be able to do that in one pass, but you'll have to kind of bunch up one leg. You'll have to bunch up the leg to get it on your sewing machine, but it will be okay.